Through your development network, which is very active in Afghanistan, you invested more than $75 million over the last years in schools, in education, into cultural projects, all kind of different projects. From all these different venues, and there are much, what would you say is the most significant for you personally?
Poverty alleviation. Feeding people who are on the brink of starvation, rehabilitating people who've left the country in dramatic conditions and who have to come back to an environment which has to receive and look after them. So it's the human dimension of that tragedy which is the most immediate issue for me.
Maybe the most dramatic problem in Afghanistan today is that more and more farmers cultivate poppy seed to produce opium. What would you say, how can we win the war against drugs?
I think essentially by taking the country away from economic collapse and giving the population an opportunity to earn honorably and live honorably. I don't believe populations automatically go into this activity. It's the response to despair, essentially.
But we have to admit today that after being liberated, Afghanistan is the #1 drug seller of the world.
Yes, and you're correct, and I think it's essential that this issue be addressed. It has to be addressed immediately. It's probably even more grave than we actually see in terms of the figures. It could have a terrible impact on the political process, on the elections, etc. So it is an absolute urgent issue to address. I think that what is essential is to give the population of Afghanistan credible alternatives from which they can earn an honorable living. Because at the moment, the poverty is still enormous. One has to separate out urban environments from rural environments. It's the rural environments that are at greatest risk at the moment.
Afghanistan still is one of the poorest countries of the world. Also, over the last years, millions of dollars have been invested into the country by private organizations like yours and by public organizations. What do you say? How can we stimulate better the country's own capacities?
I think it's a question really of trying to achieve what I would call a multiple input process. That is, you don't concentrate only on the economy, you don't concentrate only on social service. You try to bring all these inputs together to function as a net. And if they function as a net, the whole country will move forwards. It's very difficult to tell at any given time in a situation like the one in Afghanistan what input is going to have the most immediate impact. And generally it's not a national phenomenon. In a country like Afghanistan, it's by region.
You participated in the Afghanistan conference here in Berlin. It's the 3rd conference of this part. What would you say is the signal of Berlin?
First, I think that the international community is placing its trust in a forward process in Afghanistan, and that process is on course. People recognize, we all recognize its fragility, but it is on course. Secondly, I think this conference has shown the individuality of the Afghan situation in comparison to other crisis areas of the world.
Would you say that the public, the people in Afghanistan have been won for this process over the last years, or is there still a lot of mistrust again? I mean, also the agencies from outside who came into that country.
From what I can see, I would sense immense relief relief after decades of conflict, of poverty, of extremism. And these are people who are tired, and they're looking for a new future. And I think that is the greatest sense I have of what's happening. And it's up to the international community, the Afghans, organizations such as mine, to turn this fatigue into a process of hope.